Okay, everyone, not a great amount of Celtic news to discuss on today's video. That is, if you aren't a fan of Mikey Johnson scoring belters while out on loan at West Brom. He scored West Brom's second goal in their 3-0 win over Plymouth Argyle last night. It's a cracker of a goal. Really good. Would have been nice to see that in a Celtic shirt, but good to see he's flourishing down there with a couple of goals to his name so far. So I thought on today's video we could just take a little bit of a break from the kind of newsy stuff and take a look at the current Celtic squad, and more specifically the potential Celtic starting 11 that could still lead us to glory in, well, two competitions, but specifically the league this season. We are only a couple of points behind Rangers at the top of the table. It's still there to be won. I know it's a bit difficult at the moment to feel positive about the club and even this team, but maybe, just maybe, a change in starting lineup and getting a few players back could prove to be the catalyst that leads us to a successful season. So without further ado, this is the current Celtic squad, and no, James McCarthy isn't there before you start, and yes, Liel Abada is, although I don't expect him to still be at the club for too much longer. So yeah, when you compare this squad to what the depth was like this time last year, it's a pretty bleak picture, I would suggest. I mean, our wing options in particular aren't very strong. And when you consider that Abada, who, you know, on his day is undoubtedly, for me, the best actual winger there, he isn't going to be there, then, you know, things look pretty grim. Also, you know, previous first picks this time last year, Alistair Johnson, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Rayo Hatate, three players who were huge in terms of us winning the treble last season. They've all missed large spells of this season. And yeah, just away from that, there are just so many players there who, like, in the nicest possible way, I just don't hold out too much hope for them having a successful Celtic career in the future. You know, like Alexandro Bernabe and, you know, Odin Thiago Holm and Yi Yang and, yeah, Adamida and players like that. But if we can confine it just to the starting lineup, what is the best Celtic starting lineup when everyone is fit? How quickly can we get to that point? Will we get to that point? Does Brendan Rodgers want to get to that point? And if we do get to that point, can it gain us more points in terms of the league, and could it lead us to the title? The obvious place to start is in goal, and it's a pretty straightforward one, obviously. I mean, Joe Hart is straight in as our best goalkeeper. Yeah, there are still reservations about him. You know, me personally, I think next season I would, regardless of us winning the league or not winning the league, I would like to see us sign a new first choice goalkeeper. And I think it possibly is the time for Joe Hart to move on at that stage, at the end of his 3-year contract. I think for now he's undoubtedly, you know, the number one option. Doesn't really say a great amount for Scott Bain and Ben Siegrist, that they're kind of nowhere to be seen, even when Joe Hart hasn't always been convincing this season. I know he's been better in recent weeks and probably our best performer since the new year. But yeah, Joe Hart for me is certainly in there at right back, and this is sometimes the difficult thing to do when you're doing these teams, that you kind of remember the player for who they were and not who they are at the moment. And Alistair Johnson, you know, is a perfect example there. The Alistair Johnson who first arrived at Celtic and played, you know, the last 6 months of last season is undoubtedly our best right back. He would be in this team. However, Alistair Johnson hasn't lived up to those levels at all this season. I know he started the season with, you know, an injury and didn't have a pre-season, and we often hear how important that is for players having a proper pre-season, especially under a new manager. But since he came back into the team in, like, what was it, like mid-September, early September, in fact it was maybe kind of late August, he hasn't really been the same player at all. And Anthony Ralston has been decent enough in, the past few weeks. That tackle against Hibs was a big moment, and there's been more moments like that. I would still, when he's fit, put Alistair Johnston back in the team and just kind of hope that he can reach that level again, because he was sensational for us last season. If he can find that form when he comes back into the team, probably in about 4 weeks, I think he could be a very important player for us in the run-in. Centre back, Cameron Carter-Vickers, again, is someone who's missed a lot of this season through injury. He's just had, injury after injury, and there's obviously real worries about what his long-term future is as well, especially having that kind of operation on his knee, wasn't it, at the end of last season. He, for me, still, obviously, when he's fit, has to come straight back in, and I think he will. It's a pretty safe bet, and I think he'd make a big difference. Carter Vickers, he just would give the defence that bit of solidity. And I'd also like to see Mike Nawrocki next to him. We got a glimpse of that at the start of the season, and I know you could argue, centre backs should be good enough just to be good on their own without having Carter Vickers next to them. But we saw how much better a player Carl Starfelt became when he had his mate next to him, and I think we need to try and form that partnership between Nawrocki and Carter Vickers. That's potentially one for next season, potentially. Having said all that, I think, at this point, Liam Scales is a far more proven option than Nawrocki, and has been this season. So my centre-back pairing for the rest of this season, once Carter Vickers is back, would be Carter Vickers and Scales, and I'd go with Greg Taylor at left-back. Again, there's, reservations about his long-term suitability to this team. Like goalkeeper, it's another position that, well, not just that I would like to sign in the summer. We absolutely have to sign a left back in the summer. I still can't believe we didn't do it either last summer, or even more inexplicably we didn't sign a left back in the January transfer window. Remarkable. Anyway, Greg Taylor for me, while he has his flaws, is just a far more polished and reliable player than Bernabe. I know Adam Montgomery was on that list as well. Mitchell Frame potentially could have been on that graphic. Greg Taylor for me at left back, and when you've got Hart, Johnson, Carter Vickers, Scales, Taylor, that's 4/5 of the kind of back line from last season. Obviously Scales has come in for Starfelt, and maybe me harking back to last season as a theme of this video, because it's very similar in the midfield. Rio Hatate is yet another player who's been missing for long swathes of this season. And while I do think we've shot ourselves in the foot with so much this campaign, recruitment, just kind of baffling decisions made by many people on and off the pitch at the club. One area where we have been unfortunate is injuries. We have had a lot of injuries to key players, and not just injuries keeping players out for a couple of games. It's been months at a time for Johnston and Carter Vickers and Hatate. I think Maida's missed a period, and Abada, when he was an option at the start of the season, missed months. So we've had lengthy injury layoffs, and Hatate is possibly been the biggest one. And getting him back at some stage, even if it is in a month's time and we're still in the title race, could be a big boost. The midfield I've gone for is Callum McGregor, Matt O'Reilly and Rio Hatate. That's what we saw last season. It was really successful. That midfield just worked really well, and we've not really had a chance to see it this season. David Turnbull was in there for a bit. Odin Thiago Holmes come in. Tomoki Awata has been in there. Obviously, Paulo Bernardo has been in there. There's probably been other players I'm forgetting as well. Kyogo's almost playing in midfield at the moment, isn't he? Bernardo potentially has something to offer. I could see him being an important player in the run-in, but maybe more off the bench. Iwata is someone who I would have in this weekend at Motherwell. I just think I would have Iwata given us more control in that deeper position, McGregor playing further forward, and O'Reilly the kind of third member of that midfield. But I think when Hatate comes back, he has someone, who would come back into the fold. In terms of the front three, and again, like for me, the wingers are like, there's many problems right now at the club, but the wingers are probably my number one problem. Like, we literally don't have any ones that are reliable right now, from people like James Forrest, who I love, but just clearly isn't getting a look in anymore, to Abada for reasons that are well documented, and the other four who just really struggle at the moment. Maida would always be in my team. Certainly at the moment he would always be in my team, because he gives you that work rate, and he also stretches the game. He makes those kind of penetrating runs in behind that I don't think Palma or Yang do, and I'd need to see more of Kuhn, to be honest. He's not looked great so far, and they all look like they kind of want to take the ball to feet, whereas Maida does like to stretch the game, and I think that's really important in terms of like trying to get back to what we did last season. Just to skip ahead slightly, I'll come back to the wingers, but I want Kyogo playing in that last man again. I don't want any of this him dropping into midfield. It's clearly not working. Get back to basics, get him doing what he does best, stretch the game, and tell people to try and find him, whether that's the centre midfielders or the wingers or the full-backs. We just need to try and find Kyogo much quicker, and he needs to be running in behind and stretching the game. I don't understand why we've moved away from that this season when it was so successful last season. But yeah, for Kyogo stretching the game, I think you need Maida to do it as well, probably on the right, and then left hand side. I'm not sold in any of the options we have at the moment, but I would probably go with Luis Palma, given that he's offered us the most this season. So far he's kind of proven to be the most reliable out of all the wingers. I've still got massive question marks over him and like his ability and his effort sometimes, and his kind of will to kind of give everything for the jersey. But I think I'd put him in there and just hope that with better players around him and maybe a more consistent team, that he could, get back to producing those moments of magic that could prove to be vital between now and the end of the season. So yeah, for me, with everyone fit, that's the best Celtic starting lineup. Obviously, football doesn't work like that. If it did, something close to resembling that would have played for us virtually all of the season. That hasn't been the case. We've had injuries. We'll have more injuries between now and the end of the season. I just hope they're not as damaging as they have been up until this point. And I hope that we can get Carter-Vickers, Johnston and Hatate back into the fold as soon as possible, because I think those guys could make a difference in the run-in if we're still, in with a fighting chance. For now, it's a game at a time. And we need to look ahead to Motherwell, and it's a game we absolutely have to win. And we'll touch on that on the channel as we move forward. But something just a little bit different today. I look at kind of the Celtic squad and obviously the options we have at our disposal between now and the end of the season. Let us know what you think. Is there anything you think that Rodgers could change either for Sunday or maybe looking forward a bit that could bring the much needed change to our season and lead us to this title? It's still there to be won, but I think it's fair to say the way we're going at the moment, that's not going to be the case for much longer. Something has to change, and hopefully we can see it very soon.